Hello, it's Daniel Bryant here. Before we start today's podcast, I wanted to tell you about QCon London 2024, our flagship conference that takes place in the heart of London next April 8th to 10th. Learn about senior practitioners' experiences and explore their points of view on emerging trends and best practices across topics like software architectures, generative AI, platform engineering, observability, and the secure software supply chain. Discover what your peers have learned, explore the techniques they are using, and learn about the pitfalls to avoid. I'll be there hosting the platform engineering track. Learn more at qconlondon.com. I hope to see you there. Hello and welcome to the InfoQ podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Bryant, and this week we're going to try something a bit different with a brief review of the recently released InfoQ Java and JVM Trends Report. Now, many folks in the InfoQ team and the wider Java community were involved in the production of this, and we'll give them a proper shout out during the conversation, but I sat down with the primary author of this year's report, Michael Redlich, who leads the Java topic here at InfoQ. So welcome to the InfoQ podcast, Mike. Could you introduce yourself to the listeners, please?
Sure. Good morning. I'm Michael Redlich. I'm the lead Java Q editor at InfoQ. I retired from ExxonMobil about 5 months ago after 33 and a half years of service. So all of my work at InfoQ and other contributions to open source are my full-time job these days.
So we're going to talk about the upcoming InfoQ Java Trends Report. So by the time this chat is published, so will have the report been as well. So we'll definitely dive into who's contributed to that report because it's very much a community effort. You and I are talking about it today, but there's a lot of folks behind the scenes contributing to this. So I'd definitely like to give a shout out to all those folks too. But what are the key takeaways for the Java Trends Report this year?
One of the first things that I think is foremost is Java Virtual Threads, JEP 444, which was released in September with JDK 21. There was, just so much content out there, especially from the Oracle dev advocates and other folks that were providing a lot of information in the background and how to use virtual threads and those kinds of things. One of the other things that is really new this year is commitment from Oracle to evolve the Java language for students and beginners so they can more easily write their first Hello World applications without the need to understand more complex features of the language. And related to Java 21 was also 4 features that had gone through their incubator and preview releases and now were finalized for JDK 21. So examples, of course, are virtual threads, pattern matching for switch, and record patterns. That's 3 of the 4 that I can recall at the moment. A new project to complement Project Loom, Project Valhalla is Project Galahad. And this was related to GraalVM aligning themselves with releases for the OpenJDK releases every 6 months. And so this was created to contribute Java-related GraalVM technologies and prepare them to be in a upcoming release of a JDK. Another new interesting feature from this past year is a new microprofile JWT bridge specification. And this was a collaboration between the microprofile and Jakarta EE working groups. And this was a way for Jakarta security applications to use the micro JWT specification. And this is in a single annotation. So this is still a work in progress. From what I understand, the folks are trying to have this in the release of Microprofile 7.0, which will be sometime next year. So this is very early. There are some examples out there on how to potentially use that. So I've experimented a little bit with it, and I think it's going to be a fun feature. It's synonymous to, like, say, Jakarta NoSQL or other Jakarta EE specs that use microprofile config. So it's a similar kind of relationship with this. So I think this is new and exciting and look forward to that being released. So those are the highlights. We have lots of good content in the upcoming release of the InfoQ Java Trends Report. So stay tuned for that.
Fantastic, man. Fantastic. Yeah, no, I've definitely got to shout out. We do look at, say, surveys, we look at data, because I know a lot of folks reach out to us and say, how do you do these trend reports, right? And they are very much opinion piece, right? We do look around, but you and the team, and we bring in other folks in the community to contribute to as well. Do you want to shout out anyone, Mike? I know that you've led the initiative this year, but there's many voices behind this report, right?
Yeah, so, we have awesome editors in the Java space, and the main contributors were myself and Johan Jansen. And then we have quarterly meetings with the group, and we discussed the Crossing the Chasm model this past August and what technologies should move from, in the various spaces of that Crossing the Chasm model. So that included Ben Evans, Eric Koslow, Karsten Sills, Olympio Pop, Basloor Rahman, and Shaf Syed. And then the external contributors were Ixchel Ruiz, developer advocate at JFrog, Alina Yurenko, developer advocate for GraalVM at Oracle Labs, and then Rustam Mamandarov, chief engineer at Computas AS. So this is some great contributors. They're all Java champions, so they really provided a lot of great input.
Fantastic, Mike. Yeah, there's so many familiar names there, both practitioners and dev advocates. And now, owning my bias, as a previous dev advocate, I'm obviously a big fan of listening to both of these voices. InfoQ, very much based on the practitioner role. It's by practitioners for practitioners. And it's great to learn about use cases and specific implementations. I think the value that dev advocates can often bring is providing the bigger picture look across the industry, right? And helping us pattern match on common issues and solutions. So to get started on our analysis, I wanted to dive into Java adoption first. Now, obviously, we had the release of Java 21 in September, which both you and Basloor Rahman and many of the Java team have covered already on InfoQ, so listeners can check out the coverage there. But I wanted to get your thoughts on what's the real-world adoption been like. Now, Java 21 will be a LTS release for many vendors, so that's long-term supported, like commercially supported often, in comparison with the shorter support windows often offered for the minor version updates, right? So are folks rushing to Java 21 or more slowly making their way to Java 21 or maybe even the last LTS release, which was Java 17, right?
Alina Yurenko said that she sees the speed of adoption of the latest Java versions increasing. And she's seen this at conferences and questions that she gets from folks in the Java community. And then they had their own community survey last year. And she said that 63% of their users were already on Java 17 or higher. So it seems like, yes, there is more adoption. Java 17 was the last LTS release before Java 21.
Fantastic. So folks are sort of getting on to it. What do you think are the most exciting features and tools in this Java 21 release?
Oh, virtual threads for sure is one of the so I know sequence collections is still in preview, but that should be finalized at some point within the next couple of Java releases. Record patterns, pattern matching, the unnamed classes and instant methods, that's still in preview, and that's the JEP for the beginners. We got a key encapsulation mechanism API, which is for improved security. Pattern matching for switch. Oh, foreign function and memory. That's I think will be a final preview in JDK 22. And then generational ZGC is another one that didn't go through the preview or incubation process, but that was a final feature right away. So there's a lot of good stuff that is in JDK 21. I believe there were 15 new features. So, as opposed to the last few years, maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, going back to, I think Java 9 had the most set of JEPs that were available. So yeah, this is really an interesting time for Java. So yeah, so look for more coming up. And JDK 22, we have, just as a preview, we already have foreign function and memory API that will be a final feature, unnamed variables and patterns. The vector API, that's been part of Project Panama for a long time. It's going to see its 7th incubation. So I think that pretty much projects that it will probably see a couple of previews as well. And then string templates is another new feature that will be in its 2nd preview for JDK 22. So the review for that one ends on Wednesday. There's usually a week once it's posed to target. So I anticipate seeing that as targeted for JDK 22. So that's 4 at the moment.
Fantastic. Just going back to the 21 stuff you mentioned there, Mike, I'd love to get your thoughts on virtual threads in just a second. But I think another thing that would jump out to our listeners is also the Z or Z GC changes. I know we saw Sahil Patel at, I think it was QCon New York, and maybe also QCon San Francisco. He talked about the massive performance impact that can potentially have. I think he was running some Kafka clusters, something like this, and he was saying this new GC model can really stop the world collections, right? I don't know if you've got any more thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to admit that I haven't experimented with a lot of the garbage collection in Java. I'm familiar with what's out there, but that's about all I can say. And
Sounds like you know just enough garbage collection to be dangerous, Mike, right? So very similar to myself, I'll be honest. Just looking at my notes here, and I can see that the ZGC or ZGC garbage collector was introduced in Java 11 as JEP 333, and it was a low latency, high scalability garbage collector. And now with Java 21, it's evolved into a generational garbage collector. I think previously, even without handling generations, ZGC was quite an improvement with GC pause times, which many of us have bumped into. The stop the world pauses can be really impactful on applications or data stores that use a JVM. But with the old version of ZGC, all objects were stored regardless of their age, and all of them had to be checked during every GC run, I believe. With Java 21, ZGC splits the heap into two logical generations, one for the recently allocated objects and another for long-lived objects. So now the GC can focus on the collecting younger objects more often and without increasing pause time. And this is what Sahel referenced in his QCon talk. We definitely recommend consulting experts when choosing your garbage collector. Just to highlight again, Mike and I are not GC experts. Please don't just choose your garbage collector at random, and definitely don't use the random GC command line flags. I'm sure many of us early on in our careers were always looking for the magic incantations to put on your command line flags, right? Please don't do this. I learned from my mentors, I think Mike's mentors as well, Ben Evans and Martin Verberg. This really isn't a good look. And if I ever bump into GC challenges in my general day-to-day life, I do consult these kind of experts as well. So we thoroughly encourage you to do the same. Moving on to the Java EE or Jakarta EE kind of space, the enterprise edition space, and there's lots of stuff. Obviously, microservices, everyone is developing microservices these days, or seemingly everyone. How does the latest version of Java and Jakarta play into developers that are building microservices?
So Jakarta EE 10 is the latest version out there. Jakarta EE 11 is scheduled to be released in the first half of next year. But the working group is looking to put out a milestone 1 on December 5th. So I look forward to reading about that. I can tell you there are 16 new or upgraded specifications for Jakarta EE 11, including the new Jakarta data. And that spec is designed to be sort of an abstract level above Jakarta persistence and Jakarta NoSQL. So basically, you'll have the NoSQL and the relational world in order to use Jakarta data to create database backend applications more easily. So that's an exciting thing. Jakarta NoSQL won't be on the platform profile, unfortunately, but hopefully maybe for Jakarta EE12. But it is available for developers to use. And I have a great beer application to demonstrate it. So anyway, there's a lot of great things out there. I know Jakarta Security will be upgraded, Jakarta Servlets. So servlets, of course, have been around for a long time, going back to, the Java EE days. I think even back, I want to say, probably the early 2000s.
Yeah, I was coding on those back then, but raw servlets, that's how I started my career. Yeah, very much so.
Right? So that it's good to see that spec evolving and being out there for developers to use. Jakarta Expression Language is another spec that's going to be updated. Jakarta Faces, I believe, so the old Java Faces API. So there's a lot of great things that are out there for that. I think there's 42 specs altogether in Jakarta EE.
Fantastic. Now, I was chatting to my buddy Josh Long. You know Josh as well. Like, Josh is a legend in the Java space, right, in the Spring space. And he was doing a fantastic talk. I think it was IT Connect. I was in Belgrade. And he showed us the latest features of Spring, Spring Cloud. But of course, there's Helidon you've talked about. There's Micronaut. There's many others. What's your general read on the space? There's a lot of microservice type frameworks, cloud type frameworks popping up in the Java world. Any interesting takeaways from the trend report on those?
Helidon 4 was just released not too long ago. And the big feature in that is their Helidon Nema. They rebuilt their web server from the ground up. So the previous web server component in Helidon SE was based on Netty, but that has been redone, and then now it's a full virtual thread web server. I haven't had a chance to really experiment with it yet, but Oracle claims that there is performance benefits from using this new web server. Micronaut, I know they've got a lot of components for building applications. So they are evolving. Their version 4.1.6 is their latest release. And anybody who's out there who's familiar with Grails, it's the same kind of syntax on the command line to build those applications in Micronaut. Let's see, Quarkus, that's the best of breed libraries, as they say. They say it's super fast, supersonic Java. But yeah, so Quarkus is a collection of libraries that developers can use to build applications. So that one's unique in that regard. Helidon's different because it has their SE and their MP for microprofile version, so the components are different depending on what you want to use. The application server, I believe, is built into Helidon MP. That's one of the differences. But they're all great to use. Really, can't say which one's better than the other. It's one of these things where it depends on the application that you want to build. That's the best thing I can recommend in that. And the best thing, too, all of these frameworks have a starter page. So you go and you can click on what you want, and then it'll download a zip file from you, and you can easily get a starter application going just by doing that.
That's fantastic, Mike. Something I've noticed more in general, so going back to Josh's talk, the latest versions of Spring Cloud, Spring Boot are sort of skewing towards ease of getting started. You mentioned already that even the Java language itself, there's been a concerted effort to make it easier for folks. And I've seen things like Spring Modular, for other drop-ons, talked about that quite a bit, and making it easy to do the right thing. Easy to get started, easy to do the right thing. So I'm liking that. That's one thing I think you do get with a mature language stack like Java, right? Compared to some other perhaps more earlier stage languages, which again I love as well. But I think the Java stuff, we've come through the ringer over the years, right? And we sort of know the good things to do, hopefully, and the bad things to do. So I'm definitely seeing the Microservice frameworks making it easier to get started and do the right thing.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a great thing, especially if you're new to it. This way you can get a feel for how things are wired together, especially configuration files and, things like this. So yeah, Jakarta EE also has a starter page that folks can use to get started as well.
Fantastic. We'll try and link some of those in the show notes. It might make it easy for folks to have a play around. So I'm totally supporting what you're saying of like, there is no one size fits all here. Have a play with these things, understand them. Like that's the benefit of the Trends Report, right? We give you the insight as to the interesting things that we think you should be looking at. So yeah, lovely. That's fantastic. Love to dive into a couple of more technical things, Mike, and then we can sort of look at the community reaction and perhaps look to the future. You've already mentioned virtual threads, which I think was fantastic. I also saw a fantastic talk by Gerrit Grunwald at IT Connect around the coordinated restore at checkpoint crack feature. That one came up, I believe, in the Trend Report too, as an interesting piece of tech.
Yeah, that I know Azul has released their downstream distributions of OpenJDK with crack, CRAC.
Yep.
I always found that acronym to be funny. But anyway, yeah, so that is something that's already going to be built in for developers. And I'm looking for exciting things coming from that. And, this whole, native Java, Spring Native, and, GraalVM and Project Layton, those will all be part of Cold Start, I guess, as it were, for especially big Java applications.
Fantastic, man. Fantastic. You touched on there, you mentioned Azul. Of course, there's many OpenJDK distributions these days. We've seen by Corretto, by Amazon, Azul, of course, Oracle, loads of folks have got them. There is community distributions out there. Could you share a little bit of insight for the listeners as to why they might consider various different distributions? Any thoughts on the different options out there?
I can't think of any for instances, but yeah, Bellsoft's another one. I know one of the things they do is they maintain the CPU or the critical patch updates that are aligned with Oracle's. So they provide those updates, and that's by Bellsoft.
I've seen them in build packs actually, Mike. I like using the CNCF build packs project, and Bellsoft popped up a lot in there as I think one of the default Java providers. So I played with that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I know one of the other downstream distributions, I believe, includes Java FX or JFX.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah.
It's great to see the downstream distributions taking the OpenJDK, right, and then build it, but add in their own features.
Yeah, yep.
And then I believe there is also some, I guess, upstream. So if Oracle feels like whatever a vendor has done on the downstream end, they can probably backport that over into OpenJDK. So I think it's a great relationship, and that's the beauty of open source.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%. Fantastic. We'll link a few of those we've mentioned there in the show notes as well, so folks can have a play around with that. Before we sort of wrap up, I'd love to get your thoughts on what's the community reaction been to Java over the last years. You've very much got your finger on the pulse. You're in the InfoQ Java team. You're hearing what comments come back on the news, and you're going to conferences and chatting to folks. What do you think the future of Java looks like?
I think this is an awesome time to be part of the Java community and to using Java. I still laugh because I still see references that Java is dead.
Yeah, same. I do.
And that's not even close to what's happening with Java EE having been donated to the Eclipse Foundation to, create an open source version of the Enterprise Edition. I think that is just a great thing for the Java community to contribute. A great example is MicroProfile. They started in 2016 and they used the CDI, JAX RS, and I think JSON P as their original 3 specs that were part of the JSRs back then. But then the community folks are the ones who created metrics, health, fault tolerance, config, and this was outside of Oracle. So that's just a beautiful thing, I think. And, I know developers are out there, they're excited about Java. You still have your folks that I guess don't like Java. I know one person in particular from a former computer club would prefer to use Go, but, that's his choice. That's fine. But yeah, no, I think there's a lot for Java developers out there. We talked about Quarkus, Helidon, Micronaut. Then Spring, of course, we haven't talked too much about Spring, but the Spring framework has evolved so much in the past 20 years. I think next year is the 20th anniversary. I don't know if it already happened or if it's next year, but I believe Spring, with their dependency injection, was in response to the complexity of enterprise Java beans.
I remember that, yeah.
And it was just dependency injection, right? And look at how that's evolved to all the Spring projects, like, Spring Boot, of course, Spring Cloud, Spring Data. You can go on. There's, I would say close to 15 to 20 projects.
So after the Log4Shell vulnerability that was discovered back in 2021, right, we had lots of coverage on InfoQ, lots of coverage on the internet in general on that one. And that actually still is being exploited, just a heads up to folks. Recently read a report there's a shocking number of artifacts or libraries, Log4j libraries, that are still vulnerable, are being downloaded via Maven Central and other places. So please don't do that. Please make sure you update your version of Log4j. But I wanted to ask in general, Mike, is there anything new in the world of Java project CVEs?
I see it a lot, when I look for news items for the Java Weekly Roundups. A small point release will address a particular CVE, and I try to capture all those.
Fantastic. That's a shameless plug, Mike. I think it's still worth doing, right? I always enjoy your weekly summaries. I know you and the team basically scour the internet looking for things like this, right? All the latest framework updates. I know you summarize the JEPs and their current status within the OpenJDK. So folks basically follow you on InfoQ is, I think, the key call to action there, Mike, right?
It'd be nice if, I don't know if I have a lot of folks that follow my profile, so I appreciate their support. First off, it's come down to a science in capturing all this and having bookmarks that I check every week and, follow along the mailing list in the OpenJDK space and, all that. And just as a reminder to the listeners, the weekly Java roundups were created to capture all those small point releases, that, wouldn't be necessarily worthy of a full detailed news piece, but at least it gives the Java community to see what's actually happening and just to follow along. So yeah, this was actually started by Ben Evans, but that was a great idea. And I took that over when I took over as the lead.
Fantastic. If folks want to find you, Mike, where's the best place to connect? Obviously InfoQ, but are you on Twitter? You on LinkedIn? Where's the best place for folks to reach out?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm sure I'm one of the few persons named Redlich out there. And then my Twitter handle is MPREDLI. I try to remain a little active on Twitter. And, of course, InfoQ advertises all the news releases on Twitter as well.
Fantastic, Mike. Well, thank you very much for your time today. We'll be sure to link the final trend reports off the show notes as well when that one's released. And I really appreciate your input, Mike. Thank you very much for chatting today.
Oh, thanks for taking the time to, have this chat. It was great.